Now, your story, after you wrote Jehovah's Witnesses in Canada, what made you question? What was it that made you question and led you to leaving?
I knew and had experienced the treatment of my parents and others, and going to school as a Jehovah's Witness. And there was this feeling of persecution. And the witnesses, of course, said, "Oh, we stood for Jehovah God, and therefore this is the true religion." And I went to witness conventions when I was in my teens, and then I went to Arizona, and I was with witnesses down there, some of them who were very fine people. And I remained faithful to the organization. When I went back after I was married, that was quite a few years later, uh, I was becoming very tired of the.
Oh, I think we lost him for a second. We had a little internet connection problem on your end, but there's always another way to do it. So now we've got you by audio on Zoom. So now we're at the part of the story where you're starting to question things in Watchtower. What made you question, and how did you leave? Why did you leave?
Well, I began to question as a result of doing some historical research, but that wasn't the main thing. There were many things going on that I disliked intensely. In 1971, Ray Franz, who was on the governing body, and a number of persons at the headquarters of the Watchtower Society began to say, "Hey, we've been too harsh on people who have been disfellowshipped or driven out. And also, we should reestablish the elders' ministry that Rutherford had done away with. And we should take the authority of the district and circuit overseers away. They should go out, but they should just be other elders working with the brothers in the various congregations." And this happened from 1971 actually to 1975. And with that, there came to be an opening up, and I felt for the first time in many years that the organization was moving in the right direction. And many of the things that they were suggesting were very positive. The treatment of disfellowshipped persons was to change and be moderated, and the direct control by the Watchtower Society was cut back, and that lasted very nicely till 1975, and then the failure of the prediction that the world would end in 1975 failed, and the organization, the people at the top, saw thousands of witnesses leaving. And the result was that they began to buckle down and force the preaching work. And I had felt that they were on the right track in 1971, 1972, and for that short period, it was a period of reformation in the organization.
Yeah, there's an article here in the August 1st, 1974 Watchtower, and the title of the article is "Maintaining a Balanced Viewpoint Towards Disfellowshipped Ones." They were really trying to moderate it.
They really were trying to moderate it, and it was so positive. But at the same time, the elder member of the governing body, the elder Franz, Freddie Franz, was stuck on 1975, and a lot of people were stuck on 1975. I didn't say anything about it one way or another, but I remember when my mother-in-law, who was living with us at the time, a very fine woman, came home and she said, well, they're saying in this book that they've brought out that there's evidence that the end will be in 1975. And I said, Mother, that can't be. And I took it and went back to the bedroom and I looked at and read this. And when I saw this, I was so angered, I threw the book on the bed and I said, the damn fools, will they never learn? I was familiar with 1925, with 1914, 17, 18, all of this business, and of course, Pastor Russell back into the early years of 1984 and so forth. And I said, it's wrong to start establishing dates. And consequently, I stuck with the organization, but I decided that I had to speak up. And I have my book coming out, and I was working on that, and I felt very good about it. And it was well received in Canada and with the branch in Canada. And everything was hunky-dory at that point, but I could tell. I had visited various branches of the Watchtower Society doing research. I went to Puerto Rico. I was horrified by the thing, and also horrified by the fact that they were going backward. And I saw them putting the old clamps on, the excommunications were getting more severe, and the authorities of the district and circuit overseers were increasing, and the work that we were doing during the period of relaxation, they had set up a program where we were to visit the sick and go into the hospitals and everything else, and I had done a lot of work in doing that. And I don't think that Knorr was a reformer in any sense of the word. Quite frankly, I think he was a hard-boiled Dutchman. And what Knorr was out of the way, although Ray Franz thought that Knorr would be more reasonable. But he certainly wasn't reasonable with me. When I was doing my research on Jehovah's Witnesses in Canada, Knorr said that he ordered that the branch not give me any correspondence between the former Premier of Saskatchewan, Tommy Douglas, who was responsible for our health program here in Canada, and he was a real decent guy. He was a Baptist minister, but he fought more than anybody else to give Jehovah's Witnesses freedom. And when he became premier in Saskatchewan, he was the first person to come up with the Bill of Rights in Canada. And he spoke out openly a number of times for Jehovah's Witnesses, but Knorr wouldn't let me see any of the correspondence between him and the Watchtower Society. And so I have very little patience with Knorr any more than I do with Fred Franz. And he was no reformer. He let Fred Franz's nephew, Ray Franz, produce a major study, and Ray had enough influence to push it and get ahead with it, and Knorr didn't stop it. And in that sense, he was more liberal than Fred Franz, but outside of that, he was a pretty dictatorial person. and it was under him that the whole system of disfellowshipping took place. So
So
he
that's
died
what
in-
made you really question and say something's not right here, and I need to get out.
Well, I attempted to. I had started taking the bread and wine at memorial, which angered some of my fellow elders, and the business was that I sat down and I said, "You're teaching that the anointed members of the community are the faithful and discreet slave, and now I'm going to give you some counseling." And I wrote to them.
Oh, that's good.
I was very, very respectful in a way, but at the same time, what they had done about 1975 is they had said that the people out in the world, the ordinary witnesses, had become too enthused about 1975, and it was their fault. And I wrote to them and I said that, in effect, that this is false. It came from Brooklyn, and you are responsible for the falling away, and you should openly admit this and recognize that you have responsibility in these things.
Blasphemy.
Well, that was blasphemy, and that was what caused them to come after me.
Now, I can honestly say, Jim, my grandmother was pretty heavily involved, and she had people over all the time, circuit overseers, everybody over. And even a lot that wasn't put in print was said and passed along at meetings, through circuit overseers, at conventions and stuff. So there's no way to deny they weren't, at the very least, strongly implicating and implying that 1975 Armageddon was going to be there.
And it's not just that;
you
it's
betcha.
in the Watchtower literature and in the public press.
It's so evident. It's so evident. And there was that little song that about 1975. Get ready and don't be late.
Wow.
And the public press or somebody was making fun of them. In any case, I sent this letter to Brooklyn, and I didn't get a direct reaction from Brooklyn, but I sure got a reaction from the circuit overseer, who was a very ignorant man, and from the district overseer.
So it went uphill, and then it went back downhill.
Oh, yes. But it was also, I had a couple of sisters coming to sit in some of my lectures at the university. And one of them couldn't make it that day, who was a very open-minded woman, although I didn't know it at the time that she was dying of cancer. And the other gal came, and I said, "Would you give this letter to Sister Roth?" And she said, "Oh, yes." And instead of that, what she did was she showed it to her husband, and he ran to one of the elders in one of the other congregations, and this caused locals to go after me. And I was speaking pretty boldly from the podium about some of these things. I didn't directly attack them or say what I did to the leaders in Brooklyn, but I was stating what the scripture said in some things. And the next thing I knew, one of the elders called me over to his house, and what they had done is they'd gone out and taken collected letters from people in the congregation who were upset with me, and they decided that they were going to remove me as an elder. Well, I said, okay. And then I thought about it in a day or two, and I said, I'm going to stand up to this. And so I did. And when the elders met, 3 other elders, one of them also who had been starting to partake, stood up to them, and it split the congregation right down the middle. And for a year, things went on. I'm sure that the branch didn't want to have me disfellowshipped, but they did want me removed as an elder. But it was Brooklyn that really wanted to get rid of me, and so they finally set up a committee, because half the congregations in the city of Lethbridge were split, and they knew that they had something on their hands. The result was that they sent this committee in, and the committee exonerated me.
Nice.
But then after exonerating me, they said that the body of elders will determine whether you should continue on as an elder or not. And of course they didn't, although some of my friends on the body of elders voted for me, but a majority with the circuit overseer decided I shouldn't be. And I said, well, that's it. And I walked out at that point. And then a great number of people within the congregations also walked out, and we had separate meetings, and that led to my open disfellowshipment, which turned into a veritable riot. And I didn't go to it.
You didn't go to your own hanging?
I didn't go to my own hanging. I stayed home. I wrote them a note saying that I'm not going to go to a meeting with the Inquisition, and I'm staying home and do what you like. Well, a number of the ex-witnesses decided to go and testify on my behalf, and they did. Neither my wife nor I went, nor our family. And my mother-in-law had decided to leave at the time, and my uncle, my father was dead by then, my uncle, my mother, and my mother-in-law all left at that time. And when the meeting finally broke up after about 2 hours, they must have had all sorts of testimony to the effect that I was a terrible person. And they came rushing out. And there was a friend that I had down in Washington State who had notified one of the magazines in Edmonton about what was taking place. I knew nothing about this, but he contacted them, and they sent down a photographer. The young fellow was a student at the university, and he stood on their sidewalk, and they came out and told him to get going. And so he moved to the city sidewalk and stood there taking pictures of people going in and out. And they couldn't do anything about that because it was city land. And this fellow contacted one of my colleagues at the university who was a libertarian, and he said they can't demand that he leave and not stand out on the sidewalk. But when they came bowling out, one of the elders, whom I knew very well, went after this young fellow, shouting like I don't know what, like a banshee, yes. And the young fellow was so frightened that he jumped in his car and drove over to the university and hid in a dark room. And then my couple of friends, including my older son, said, let's go over and see what's taking place. Well, they did this just before the witnesses came charging out of the Kingdom Hall. And my son said to this one fellow, leave him alone. He's got the legal right to be there. Well, he just kept right on shouting and screaming at him. And another one came up to my son and hit him. And he was a man about 60 years old, and my son at the time was in his 20s. And
sounds like a very
struck,
Christian thing to do.
Yeah, and David struck him back, hit him on the cheekbone, and broke it apparently, and he went down. And the witnesses tried to press action against Dave for this whole thing, and the man himself ended up in hospital, and he admitted that he was responsible for the first blow. And the police said that David had every right to defend himself legally, and they weren't pressing any charges. So that went on. The next day, this all came out locally and in the local press and in the Alberta press. And a number of the students at the university went over to one of the other Kingdom halls and pasted a big sign on it, boxing lessons free with Jehovah's Witnesses. And that picture got all over Canada. And then one witness woman went over and tried to get a hold of the university newspaper, students' newspaper, and they caught her, and they issued another printing, and showed a picture of her standing on the street with the Watchtower and awake, and also with the student newspaper. It was a picture which was making fun of the witnesses. And then the nationwide press picked up the whole thing from one end of Canada to the other, and it even got into some American
I think it was
papers.
I think it was in some American papers too that I found. It's really unbelievable. So what led you to,
wild.
From there, you ended up with Apocalypse Delayed. What led you to Apocalypse Delayed?